Hello, my name is Chloe. I am a senior at Corning Painted Post High School, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am white. And so today we're going to be talking about Ernie Davis and sort of his life and also aspects of his life in a more modern context. And so today I'm going to be interviewing Surav Amin about college admissions and racism. So, Surav, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Surav Amin. I'm 16 and I'm a senior at Corning Painted Post High School. I use he, him pronouns. And in terms of my background and identity, I was born in Corning, New York, and I've lived here all my life. But my dad is Indian and my mom is Latina. So I'm part Indian, part Puerto Rican, and part Mexican.
Awesome. We'll start with more of the allyship and Black Lives Matter sort of topic questions, and then we'll move on more into colleges and education in general.
Cool.
How have you become involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, and what actions do you take to support the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I've known about the organization and the movement for a few years now, but I really became much more involved and began doing a lot more listening and learning about the movement earlier this year after the death of George Floyd. It started a lot after watching the news and then having a lot of conversations about what it's like to be Black in America with friends and peers who are Black, and sort of hearing their experiences and understanding sort of the injustice and violence that happens on a day-to-day basis that I guess I hadn't been completely aware of or had been sort of blind to. And so learning about that and having those sorts of conversations with them had been really eye-opening for me, and it allowed me to become involved in Black Lives Matter as well. In June, I believe it was, there were a lot of protests going on, and so I was able to be involved in one local protest in Corning. But since then, I've been looking for ways to continue to be involved and to stay involved in other ways other than protests and ways that are safe during the time of a pandemic. So I've been doing a lot of, I guess, social media sharing. So learning about topics revolving around Black Lives Matter and then other issues across the world, and educating myself on those and then sharing those on social media for others to learn about as well. But I think personally for me, I've been doing a lot of self-education through reading, not just in news. I've been reading a lot of books. Like right now I'm reading this book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, which I started reading in the middle of January. So I've just been trying to educate myself a lot on Black experiences in the United States and outside of the United States, and sort of, I guess, be able to learn and educate myself as an ally so that I'm able to educate others and sort of make those small steps in my own life and within my own community.
Awesome. You mentioned social media and also books and just the different ways of getting information. And I was wondering how you felt about different types of media. And so, do you feel the different importances of faster media, more Instagram and stuff like that, but then also slower media such as books? How do you use those different resources to get the best information,
Sure.
if that
So
makes
I
sense?
think with the fast media, like you were saying, Instagram and other forms of social media like that, I think there's a lot of good information that stems from news and current events that happens there, and about quick ways to make change, such as things that you can donate to and just the fast spreading of information. And then I feel like the other sorts of media like books and newspapers really go a lot more in depth. I think with the books that I've been reading, a lot of them are about more personal stories. So rather than just getting the sort of outline and the important facts and data about the situation, you're hearing real stories and getting more in-depth information that's, I guess, going beyond what you would see in the news on TV. And so I feel like there's a really big importance for both the older sorts of media like books and things like that versus the new social media, because I think they both have huge benefits. And I think social media obviously has the ability to share things really well. And then I think that the books can be better, I guess, to help personally relate.
As a person of color in America, what do you feel your role is in this movement and this time?
When I think about it, I think that like all of the groups of different people of color have gone through different experiences and trials throughout history. And I think that because of that, there's sort of a shared sense of knowing the struggles and the violence that members of the Black community have gone through. And although the experiences are completely different, I think that there's a sense of shared respect because a lot of the things that Black Lives Matter stands for are so many things that other organizations, that other groups of people of color have fought with and used in the past. I think that it's really important that as a person of color, I stand with Black Lives Matter in order to really showcase my support and respect for the same struggle that other groups of people of color have gone through.
I definitely think as a white person, my role is more to just support and stand by people of color and African Americans and Black people in America at this point, rather than misinterpret something or overstate something or just get in the way. And so I think it's definitely interesting how there are different roles for people within the movement and how it's all necessary in order to show support and in order to maintain a strong standing for such an important movement.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that my experiences as a person of color are completely different than what a Black person in America has experienced. And so I think that that's a huge part of the Black Lives Matter movement is that it's like their Black Americans' experiences, or I guess not even Americans since it's become a global movement, but Black people's experiences across the world. And so I feel like in a way that I sort of feel like I'm in that same position where it's like it's just important to stand by and show your support and respect for the experiences that Black people have had to go through.
You mentioned how many people of color all experience similar struggles. And so moving into college admissions, there's a large gap in the percentage of the population that is Hispanic or Latinx or African American, and then those in those demographic groups who have college degrees. And so I guess some quick statistics. In 2019, only 6.2 of undergrads were African American compared to the national average of 13.4%. And only 9.5% of undergrads were Hispanic or Latinx in comparison to the national average of 18.5%. How do you feel this gap has influenced your college decision?
I think that I've been really lucky in my life to have a very privileged upbringing and have the ability to go through to even have the option to be able to attend a higher level education institute. But I think that being a person of color has definitely affected my admissions process as a whole because you're like as based on these demographics and these percentages of undergraduate students that you just described, I think that like it's very clear that there's a huge gap in the higher level education system between people of color and other groups of people. And so I think that it really like has played a huge role in my college decision experience in terms of where I want to go and what schools I should be able to apply to and what schools you have like a better chance at getting into because of your race and all of the demographics.
Have you either applied to a college or not applied to a college based on their attitudes towards race?
I have. When I was doing my college research, I did a lot of research on the types of communities that there were. So a lot of focus on what percentage of students were students of color and the demographics of the school as a whole. And that played a really big role in where I wanted to apply and where I didn't want to apply, because I feel like there needs to be a strong sense of community of people wherever I choose to go. And I really want to go to a place that has a relatively large population of students who are people of color, because I feel like those experiences and the perspectives are really important in the education system as a whole. And I really want to experience an education that's full of diverse perspectives. In all of the admissions calls that I went to, I made sure to ask about what the university had done for Black Lives Matter and how they had addressed it in their own individual university communities. And a lot of those answers either swayed me to like the college more and to hear about what they do for their minority services, or dislike and not really want to apply there as much.
That's really interesting. And then, of course, there are a bunch of essays in applying to colleges, and a lot of them focus on background and past experiences. When you read these prompts, do you feel encouraged by them or possibly disadvantaged? Or
Uh,
does that not even play a role?
I guess when I was reading the prompts for the Common App, I think, like I said, I've been really privileged to have an upbringing where I've had a lot of experiences and been able to do a lot of different things that a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to. So I felt like I was able to write about a lot of things, but I think that there definitely could be some disadvantages for people of color in writing about their experiences in the essays. Yeah.
The reason that I'm bringing all of this stuff up is because Ernie Davis, who is kind of the topic of these interviews, was African American and he attended Syracuse University in 1960, which was probably a pretty, how do I describe it? Well, I mean, the civil rights movement was going on from before that and up until like the later 60s as well. So it was probably just a very I don't know if dramatic is the right word, but definitely a time full of change in which young people and like students especially were having a larger role in social movements. Also, in going to college, Ernie Davis was an inspiration for many because of how America was in the 1960s and before that. How do you relate to Ernie Davis? And do you feel as though, like you mentioned, the mutual respect previously between different demographic groups and just like experiences that people have in general, those like shared experiences that bring people together in times of strife. And so I was wondering if there was any way that you related to Ernie Davis.
Well, I think what you're talking about, him being a student who was a Black student who was applying to college at that time, and he was experiencing all of these, like, I guess these challenges because of the time period that it was. I think that obviously times have changed completely, and his time period is a lot different. But I guess that's one way that I can think of that I relate to him as being a person of color applying to university and sort of, I guess, seeing challenges in terms of the admission cycle. And he faced, I guess he faced much greater challenges, being that it was at the time that he was applying was during the civil rights movement. But I think that being a person of color and applying to college with any of the challenges that still exist, I feel like I can sort of relate to him in that way.
Okay, thank you. I think this mostly has wrapped up the questions that I have for you, but I wanted to ask you for final thoughts. Is there anything you wanted to add, correct me on, talk about?
I don't think so.
Okay, and then my last question is going to be, what is the most significant thing you've learned either through the process of college admissions or education or the Black Lives Matter movement? Just something you've learned.
I think it's been that the importance of stepping outside of my comfort zone and learning about all of these new things that I hadn't ever even thought to address in the past, and being able to step outside of what I'm comfortable and what I'm used to and what I know in order to be able to make a difference, and how important that is, because the uncomfortableness of it all and the not being used to it is what is the biggest barrier, I feel like, at this point. And so being able to embrace that uncomfortableness and being able to step back there and step outside of the comfort zone, I feel like is the most significant thing that I've really learned through this whole process.
Okay, thank you. I think that concludes today's interview. Thank you, Surav, for joining me.